Hi, and welcome to the 83rd TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the inventor of TiddlyWiki, and I'm joined today from left to right by Ed. Ed, would you like to introduce yourself, say where you're from, and say something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
Hi, my name's Ed Dixon. I'm from Las Cruces, New Mexico, and I'm involved with TiddlyWiki trying to make some educational resources available for students and teachers. And I found TiddlyWiki to be the perfect way to go about trying to do that. We've got a group on Google, the TiddlyWiki Team Tiddly, I think is what it's called, and Richard Smith and several people from our community here at TiddlyWiki are a part of that, and it's going really well.
Yes, great, and Ed will do a little update about that later on. Next, Eric. Hi, would you like to say hello, introduce yourself, etc. in the time-honored fashion?
Hi, I'm Eric Schulman. I'm the creator of Tiddly Tools, the administrator of the TiddlyWiki Google Groups, and the author of Inside TiddlyWiki, the Missing Manual. And I'm in Silicon Valley, California.
Great to have you. Good morning, Eric. Great to have you with us. Jed, hi. Would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Jed Carty. I'm from the Southwest US. I use TiddlyWiki to organize my thesis research, and I make in my socks.tiddlyspot.com, and yeah, I make stuff.
Indeed, some of the most intricate stuff that I see on a regular basis in the groups. Next, Mario, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg. I contributed to TiddlyWiki Classic, still using it with TiddlySpace as a bookmarks, let's say, store. And TiddlyWiki 5, yeah, for notes and everything else.
Indeed. Great to have you here, Mario. And finally, Matt, would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi there. So I'm Matt from just outside of Stockholm, Sweden. I'm a long-time user. I am not a coder, so I use the strategy of nagging until something happens. That's my trick.
Well, I don't know. I think, to me, one of your other tricks is making mock-ups, and okay. I have found that to be amazingly useful. And goodness, yeah, I mean that is classed as making stuff. Okay, so we've got a very busy schedule today with a bunch of things that we're going to try and discuss. We're slightly restricted for time. I'm just going to try to answer some of the questions that are in the Q&A panel, and then we'll move on to the agenda that I've got, and I will try to keep things to time. So first of all, there's a question from Sylvain Naudin, and I hope Sylvain will forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, who will be known to many of you as a French contributor to TiddlyWiki. And he's recently started to organize a TiddlyWiki camp in Paris. The date is set for June the 6th this year. I'm due to hop over because obviously Paris is quite close to Oxford, relatively speaking, and Sylvain is saying that at the moment he's trying to find a place to host the event, and he sends his good wishes. So goes without saying, anybody in Europe with good transport links to Paris, able to get to Paris for the 6th of June. Please, and Jed, yes.
I may actually
you will be in Paris
or either that or England this summer. It depends on where Felicity's job takes her, but I might actually be there. So.
Well, that would be most excellent. I should look forward to meeting you. And I mean, I think obviously it's brilliant of Sylvain to organise it. And given that we have yet to find a place to host it, I think I should say that I plan to go, even if we end up hosting it, you know, in a restaurant or a pub, and depending, you know, we'll see how it goes and how Sylvain gets on with arranging hosting. And now there's a couple of questions that people have dropped by accident. Oh, so Nicholas Spies, who many of you will remember as a participant in past Hangouts, who had accepted the invitation, sends his apologies with a last-minute commitment. And of course, we completely understand for everybody. Nobody is paying us to attend Hangouts. Google's model hasn't yet reached that point. Wouldn't it be cool if they did? And then there's a question from Ed Daniel, a familiar face for me. He's somebody who's been using TiddlyWiki, I believe, for quite a long time. He's saying, is there a way to set Chromium to save TiddlyWiki to a specific location rather than default location from within TiddlyWiki, as per this help request? And there's a link to a help request that's on Google+, which explains why I didn't see it. Ow. And Alec Perky has responded with a useful screenshot that I will just share so that you can see too. Sorry, wrong window. So here's Ed's Google Plus post, and I'm sure you'll understand what he's asking. He's saying how frustrating it is in Chrome that the save changes procedure requires manual intervention each time you save. And Alec is pointing out the option in Chrome that in fact we recommend on tiddlywiki.com, which forces it to prompt you for the download location. And it does actually remember the folder that was used the previous time. So it's not terrible. And I have come across people, to me I'm still pretty surprised by it, but I have come across people who use TiddlyWiki on Chrome on a regular basis. Particularly, there was somebody who cropped up who was using it on a Chromebook. But anyway, I'm afraid, Ed, the answer to your question is there is nothing better than that at the moment, other than to use the Node.js edition of TiddlyWiki, where your changes are automatically synced per tiddler back to the server and back to the file system. And this remains a severe limitation of Chrome. One of the reasons why it's so popular, I think, is that it is fast and reliable. And one of the reasons why it's fast and reliable is that it's very restrictive as to what plugins can do, and where plugins under Firefox pretty much run with the permissions of the current user. Permissions in Chrome run in a incredibly tightly constrained sandbox.
Jeremy?
Hello, Eric.
I would like to chime in because I'm, in fact, one of those people who uses Chrome primarily. And I, in fact, have been using Chrome to do all of my work on the Inside TiddlyWiki document. And the issue that's prevalent here is about the file saving being awkward when it has to use the default download saver mechanism because of the way that the browser sort of restricts you in prompting, and it doesn't give you an opportunity for backups and other sort of direct access to the file system. What I have found, though, is that by not using the add-ons that you can use with Firefox or using Tiddly Desktop, for example, and just using Chrome with the default download saver, I've had this really interesting experience of not caring where I'm editing my document from. I have a posted online copy, I have a home copy, and the saving experience is exactly the same in both cases. So I work on the local copy, I upload it, then I go and look at it online and I think, oh, I need to change this. So I just start editing from there, and when I hit save, it still pops up because I set it to the ask location choice. That's important because otherwise it is somewhat more awkward. But even so, I find that I simply either choose the same file name and say yes, overwrite, or I let it do that parens number thing, and I use that as a short-term backup mechanism while I'm saving, so that I'm never overwriting the same file. And then after a work session of maybe a few hours, I discard all those paren ones and take the one with the final number on it and chop the number off and go back to happy. And I'm finding that as a workflow, it's not altogether inconvenient, and it works everywhere. That's
Yes,
the thing. I don't.
I think that is the cool thing. So let's keep things moving quickly. So that's one answer, Ed, is that actually the pain of using Chrome isn't so bad, and it does give us free backups. There is a recent development that does interestingly change things slightly, though, and it's this: a long-time contributor. Let me just make sure I get names correctly. Andreas Abeck. I say a long-time contributor. Sorry, Andreas. I think has been around for a few months, but he's been quite active in that time. Has created a prototype of an indexed DB sync adapter for TiddlyWiki. The significance of that is that it behaves exactly like the Tiddly web adapter, so it kicks into action every time a tiddler changes. But what it does is it saves tiddlers to the local IndexDB store. Now, this is a sandbox database that many browsers, and I think now almost all actually, provide to web pages. There are some limitations and some gotchas with it. The main one is that they place an arbitrary limit on the amount of data that you can store, and it's incredibly hard to know when you run up against that limit. So it's one of those things where there's quite an interesting promise, but the reality of how browsers implement it, makes it a bit less attractive than we'd first hoped. But anyway, Andreas's work works, and let me show it to you. And as I do so, I think you'll understand the significance of why it would be so cool if we could get this working reliably. So here's Andreas's demo site, and you can see he's got some documentation, tiddlers, and links to the plugins. Sorry, is the screen share working?
I don't see it at least.
You can, if you switch the focus and then click back to Jeremy, then you should see it.
Oh, okay, yeah, I see it. Sorry.
Oh, that's a good hint. I didn't know that it works like that. Ah, yes, okay. Well, previously, so you must have had the focus on me before I screen shared. That possibly, Mario, explains all the confusion we've ever had with screen shares not working. Okay, so here's Andreas's demo site. He's got some documentation and a link to the plugin itself. If I add a new tiddler, hello, Hangout 83. Hello, is that still working, everybody? So I created a tiddler, didn't get any save prompts. I do a refresh, and if I look in recent, the tiddler hello hangout is still there. Clearly, if I open that URL in a different browser or on my phone or something, I won't see the same changes. So this is, at best, perhaps a partial solution. But what I think is exciting about it is there is this possibility. You see, when Eric described how he works with Chrome, and the issue is that for 3/4 of an hour or so, he's making changes repeatedly, and he hasn't saved changes. So if Chrome crashes, he's lost all of that work. So I think the interesting thing about the IndexDB approach is to be able to make sure that on every key press we back up all the recent changes to IndexDB, and then even if the browser crashes, which if you're playing around vigorously with TiddlyWiki plugins is quite easy to do through no fault of your own, and yeah, possibly it's Chrome's fault in fact. So quite interesting. So let me show you. If I go into DevTools, you can see how it works under resources. There's an so under resources, normally in frames, we get like the HTML file and its attendant images and so on. Listed here, we get the index in IndexDB. We have I think this is not a database. I think this is a store called TW5DB. And then well, it looks like a table, so I guess that is a database. And as you can see, it's a very simple JSON store that allows us to pretty much save tiddlers in their native format. We keep a revision count, so that's how the synchronization stuff works, but we don't keep revisions at this point.
I think one big disadvantage here is that at least for Firefox doesn't show you where the database is. So for backup and such things, it's a little bit hard. But
well, I think that's
cool.
rather my feeling too, is that this data is locked up in the browser in a way that feels transient and outside of my control. So I don't think it's a good long-term place to store content that kind of represents efforts on my part. But as I say, I am interested in it as an insurance protection to cache changes until I have a chance to make to save changes properly. And I've discussed with Andreas some changes to the plugin which would make it a bit more efficient at doing that, where basically at boot up, if there's a tiddler found in the database that has precisely the same values and fields as the one that came in the file, then we delete it from IndexDB. And the result of that will mean that we'll continually be reducing what's in IndexDB to that delta of stuff that hasn't been saved. So that's quite an effective response to the size limitation issue, the quota issue. Anyway, so
Jeremy?
Lots to get through. Hello.
Jeremy, I don't want to direct. I have a curious thought about how to use IndexDB in a different way. A friend of mine is talking about, can we make a tablet app encapsulated version of TiddlyWiki that can actually be used to store changes? And I was thinking, well, if it's encapsulated as an app, then where would you? There's no, you can't write back to the app to save changes and updates to tiddlers. But I was thinking, what if you had an external IndexDB saved? I don't know if the browsers on the tablets have the same capacity. I suppose
they have
do.
access to IndexDB, but they have even more severe constraints on the side.
Right, but I was thinking of like, okay, so you download the app and then maybe you're just using it to add annotations to some content. So you're not really creating massive amounts of content. You're just adding some notes to something that you're reading as an encapsulated TiddlyWiki, and the annotations could be saved as an overlay of tiddlers to be added to the.
That is exactly what Andreas has implemented, if you think about it. When I refreshed the page and I got back his content with my tiddler over the top, my tiddler, although it's not, it happens we didn't have any CSS that makes something look like an annotation, but the tiddler that I added is an annotation. There's a little piece of content that I created positioned within somebody else's content.
Yes, indeed, and it's exactly the point, is that the exact same functionality but used in a different context becomes a means of taking because we've been talking about publishing TiddlyWikis as encapsulated apps on tablets, and this would be a way to allow
a custom app that encapsulates the web view. Then you absolutely can save tiddlers. So that's what the TW edit and TiddWiki apps do. Both of them exploit bridges that the platforms provide so that the native code can talk to the JavaScript and then handle the synchronization of individual tiddlers. And yeah, I mean, it's a great approach, and that's the way to do it. So we should keep moving, Eric, if you don't mind. I'm so sorry. Matt, while we're on this, mentions a Firefox plugin called Form History Control, which keeps copies of tiddler content interpreted as separate forms. And he asks, is this Firefox add-on likely fetching its data from the same source as the discussed plugin? Matt, it could be, but it doesn't have to. I mean, in Firefox, a plugin can store data in the file system, as I was saying before, has incredible freedom. So, I mean, it may use IndexDB, maybe when Firefox add-ons use IndexDB, maybe they're not subject to the same sort of brutal quotas, and so maybe it's easier for them. But of course, it's not really a problem that I've had with TiddlyFox, because with TiddlyFox the focus has always been on storing the stuff, storing the user's file back rather than trying to find a sort of native storage within Firefox. But it's a great idea, and yes, continuous backups of everything. It remains frustrating to me that we do not have that in TiddlyWiki. I would like everything. My personal notes, TiddlyWiki, although I change stuff and delete stuff all the time, I don't type that much stuff in it, and that stuff which I do type into it, I would like it all to be saved. So I'm kind of annoyed that we haven't got there yet with a good solution for retaining revisions of all tiddlers to enable us to do that. Okay, moving on. There was another couple of things that I wanted to show you, and I think these are quicker than the things that sort of might be long discussions. So let's continue down that theme. Continue with that approach. These are all recent plugins that have caught my eye. A plugin not being mentioned here doesn't mean that it hasn't caught my eye, but these are the ones that I happen to save links for. So let me again screen share. So this is a plugin that encapsulates the JavaScript editor Ace, which some of you may remember. And in fact, oh gosh, I'd forgotten it.
We can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen. Try switching away from me and back again, because it does look...
Yeah, it's been working. That works. So if you switch focus, then it works.
Switch to somebody else then back. Great. So Ace is the editor that is used in Cloud9, which is something that Mario has shown us many Hangouts ago. And I thought this was quite interesting because it's, as you know, we've got the Code Mirror plugin. The more I've worked with the Code Mirror plugin, the more I've realized that its great flexibility comes at a cost of enormous complexity, and so given that there are other editors that exist out there, I'm certainly interested in exploring their use within TiddlyWiki, and I don't know what else it does that besides adding line numbers, but it appears to work anyway. And the other thing that's quite nice is it's sponsored by InnoQ, who you may remember were, gosh, I'm not sure, I don't know if I can find the URL, but they very kindly last year, they sponsored me to come along and talk to them at their sort of technical all-hands meeting, and I did a presentation about TiddlyWiki. So conceivably, this is an indirect result of that. And I think, again, I'm very happy when I see things like that, because it demonstrates that it's not that hard to integrate an external JavaScript library with TiddlyWiki, particularly in this case because he was able to take the existing Code Mirror plugin as a starting point. So that's quite encouraging, because there's an enormous it comes up all the time in the Hangouts. There's an enormous, I'm not sure what the word is, amount of really interesting JavaScript libraries out there, and combining them in an authoring environment like TiddlyWiki often makes using them be very different. So, for instance, the Railroad plugin that Astrid recently integrated in order to do the TiddlyWiki documentation feels completely different as an interactive tool than when you treat it as a JavaScript library that's going to be modifying HTML files that you wrote in your text editor on the fly. It's a very different kind of feeling. So very happy to see that. And more in the same vein, very happy to see this. Hang on, let me just line up the link. This is a pair of plugins from
Jeremy?
Hello?
Nathan just joined.
Ah, right. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's just cancel that. Nathan keeps joining and dropping out again, so which I imagine betokens some kind of hideous technical errors. Nathan, are you here with us?
Yes,
Hello.
Sorry about that. I was having some difficulty with my audio, but it seems to be good now.
Good. Well, we're glad you could join us. Would you like to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Nathan Kane. I'm a developer from the United States, and I've been involved with the project for a little over a year now. Yeah.
Good to have you here, Nathan. Thank you very much for joining us. I was just about to start showing a new pair of plugins, and forgive me because I cannot remember the author's name. Arbue, not entirely sure what that name expands to, but a new contributor, as they say, who's produced plugins for something called SocialCalc, which some of you may remember in sort of 2006-07. It was a tool that was often compared to TiddlyWiki. It's a spreadsheet that runs entirely within the browser, and obviously it goes without saying that I don't know how to use it. Perhaps if I change a number. Ooh, look, it's got extraordinary, unexpected menus. So possibly I'm not the best person to demo it, but it is a, oh, there we go, 3. Yes, I got an update out of it, even though I inadvertently increased the height of some columns as well. I think that's really interesting. I've often talked about how much I admire Excel, that I think it has qualities that, at its best, TiddlyWiki echoes, which is it presents its users with a very simple model, an apparently simple model, that once you have learned the details, you can use it to create a large number of useful things that you hadn't anticipated before, and that's really cool. And TiddlyWiki tries, in a sense, to do for text and now images what Excel has always done so brilliantly for numbers. And I may say, in my corporate work life, I've seen people try to use Excel as a text tool. Quite extraordinary. They'll use it, for filling out big questionnaires and stuff, and they'll expand cells so that they're big enough to see multiple paragraphs of content, and it doesn't work. That's if it did work, maybe there'd be less need for TiddlyWiki. So cool to see. I didn't dig in enough to see how deep the integration is. For me, the holy grail of TiddlyWiki spreadsheet integration would be where each cell of the spreadsheet is an individual tiddler, and then I could use behind the scenes all the normal TiddlyWiki tiddler algebra to create and manipulate those cells. I will, Matt's asking for the URL, and I'll screen share again to show you his second plugin. So that was the SocialCalc plugin. The other plugin is Three.js. Now, if you haven't come across Three.js, it's a wonderful and necessary thing. So where D3 is, and hopefully people will correct me if I haven't captured things correctly, where D3 is an attempt to create an expressive JavaScript API to represent visualizations, Three.js is a much more conventional, to me, attempt to create a generic API for three-dimensional graphics that can work efficiently in a number of different circumstances. So let's see, they don't, gosh, here I am worrying about our homepage. They don't really explain what it is here. Three.js is a library that makes WebGL easy to use. I believe that you would find that it also has canvas renderers as well, which is where I got the thing about it being a generic API. But anyway, indeed, the Three.js stuff looks and behaves best when you've got WebGL enabled. So some demos are included. The horse guy, as I click and drag, moves around, and as I scroll, zooms in and out.
You don't share anymore.
Oh. So. Oh. Right, well, that would naturally. It happens every week, so hopefully that's happened that's this week's. So I clicked through to the Three.js introduction tiddler. There's a link to a number of demos, and this horse demo is typical. As I click and drag, my viewpoint changes. You can see the horse also animates, and as I scroll, it scales it. And if we get rid of, oh no, that's the thing I need to get the links to the demos. So if we open Bubbles is another one. So I think this one needs 3D specs. Maybe it looks like it's got that kind of fringe.
You need a blue and green, blue and red goggles. The old ones.
I mean, I think. Oh dear. Did I really? Oh, that was my fault. Sorry. Oh. So that may. Let's just refresh and see if that was my fault. Okay, so molecules doesn't seem to work on this version of Chrome. I could try it in Firefox.
Yeah, because this one is interesting, so you can move it around. It's really nice.
Whoa!
There are several. That's really cool.
Isn't it? And again, I mean, what we're seeing at the moment is rather as with the Cause D3 plugin, we're seeing the content embedded within a TiddlyWiki. The real issue is how easy it is to work with Tiddler style data. And in the case of my D3 plugins, I didn't do very much at all. And I say, I haven't dug through this. It looks like
Jeremy.
Okay.
If I might make an observation, I think that all of these plugins demonstrate the power of TiddlyWiki to integrate other third-party packages that give really rich renderings of data. That the baseline TiddlyWiki gives you a real nice sort of basic, here's HTML, CSS, basic image content, that sort of thing. But that the ability to do diagrams and 3D image handling and visualizations and calculate and whole spreadsheet interactions. And what it demonstrates is how easy, relatively easy it is to take an external package and enhance TiddlyWiki as the sort of vehicle for delivering that package. And then the observation I have is that the added value of putting it inside TiddlyWiki is not just as a delivery vehicle, but TiddlyWiki's ability to manage the data, as you were saying, and then finding the way to marry the TiddlyWiki side of the data to feed this package. And a lot of the stuff that's been done in the past, actually, that's what the real power was in how you wrapped it in some macro with some convenient parameters. And once, but having the package in there, is like, leaves it as a more technical challenge. But then adding the syntactic sugar that makes it easy to access and use with Tiddly data is sort of the next sort of phase of each of these, having demonstrated their potential. But that as they mature, as the ecosystem around them develops, as people have specific uses of it, that'll happen. And it'll be packaged up in really interesting ways to make them very powerful. That's just my observation about it.
Yeah. I while you were talking, made me think about, I mean, it's a slightly different point, it's almost the same point, that a reaction I had a little bit actually at Osmosoft was I worked there with a lot of people who had a deep background with the web, and for some of them it was sometimes a challenge that although TiddlyWiki exploited web technologies, it didn't always seem to them to be part of the web or well integrated with the web. And obviously it's particularly the SEO stuff, the fact that if you curl a TiddlyWiki document, you essentially get a big ball of, sorry, by curl, I mean if you directly retrieve the HTML file and inspect it, you don't get usable HTML that you can parse and process. You get TiddlyWiki's JavaScript and the raw Tiddler text. So that's a definite break with how the web, originally worked. Of course, now it's quite mainstream to work like that. Things like Angular and so on, routinely work like that.
Also, on the other side, you have this. Let's say GitHub hosting, the GitHub pages, which are single HTML files. So you have the tools like I think it's Jekyll, which creates from several Markdown files, which creates HTML files. And TiddlyWiki can be used in the same way.
Absolutely. I mean, I think I've addressed the SEO point by making it run under Node.js. And if we did the saving a zip file in the browser, which is something we have talked about in the past, that I believe it would be easy for the browser to save a whole bunch of HTML files at once as a zip file that was degenerate. In other words, it wasn't compressed. It was just the whatever tiny bit of zip plumbing is necessary to let you basically package a whole load of uncompressed files together. And then I think we've dealt nicely with the SEO point. But I think this shows something else, though. By this, I mean the apparent ease by which people have been able to spot a JavaScript plugin and spot TiddlyWiki 5 and make them work together is a really interesting one to me, because it shows that TiddlyWiki is plugged into the mainstream developer ecosystem. And one of the things that the web has enabled is this amazing way that front-end developers all over the world share their work, and it gets mashed together. And TiddlyWiki is definitively part of that, because it's been able to so easily of itself of these JavaScript plugins, and as I say, I think in some cases add a lot by turning them into an interactive tool. Anyway, must keep moving. So unless anybody's got any very rapid interruptions.
One last thought on it, which is somebody thought of the framework. That was the keyword, framework. That someone said, hey, have you noticed that TiddlyWiki is a framework?
That's on my list. And we won't do it first because it's a discussion point. And so, as to say, want to try and keep to time. So I've got that as the last item on my list, and we'll whiz through some of the others. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the evolving front page of TiddlyWiki. So what's been going on here is a long conversation with many, many strands, which has involved us repeatedly asking ourselves, what is the front page of TiddlyWiki for, and what should it look like, and therefore what should it look like? And been a lot of discussion recently, prompted by a very, very tiny thing, which I think was Matt, I think was you, that suggested, why don't we take the red diagonal ribbon in the corner of the TiddlyWiki homepage that currently shows the version number, why don't we take that and make it say helping TiddlyWiki and link to this existing helping TiddlyWiki tiddler we've got, which says things like, spread the word, open source projects need the oxygen of publicity. And when Matt did that, it reminded me of a way, I believe that we've kind of abused the GitHub ribbon. The thing is that on the web, it is that very distinctive ribbon with its white stitching is used very consistently to say, here's my link to GitHub. And obviously, TiddlyWiki largely exists in a community that isn't the GitHub community, and so they don't see that. But it strikes me that it's not actually even very suitable, really. It's quite cute to be able to duplicate GitHub's ribbon, because for people who are looking out for it, it is the signpost that they expect to take you to GitHub. But I think it was also Matt who discovered that there are some browser graphics combinations, and I think it's scaling factor as well, where the text doesn't even get made diagonal, it doesn't get rotated nicely, and it ends up being not very readable. So anyway, that little discussion led to me accelerating to do a kind of phase one of something that I've discussed before, which is to make TiddlyWiki.com be signposts to separate places, things like the developer wiki, a new documentation wiki, and a scrolling list of latest news. And it's a kind of, even that's not really an end goal. The end goal would be to host the community's discussions on TiddlyWiki.com. But it's a kind of intermediate goal to do that. So to try and get a bit closer, I've been messing around with a slightly less ambitious set of changes. And that is just to introduce, sorry, let me screen share, to change the text of the hello there tiddler and to introduce some highly graphical links to act as signposts to other important tiddlers. So, so this isn't everything that we've discussed doing, but it feels to me like phase one. So this is what it looks like at the moment. Because this is the pre-release, we get those two tiddlers first, but this is what it would look like to a new visitor. So you can see brand new text there and there. A set of 8 links. These 8 links, we'll go through them in a moment, but some of them are placeholders and they're not intended to be the ones that we go into production with. And finally, 3 external links, which are roughly standardized. Well, in these cases, they'd be called social links, I think. And they're actually external links. You may be able to see in my status bar down there. So I'm pointing to the main TiddlyWiki mailing list, to the Twitter account, and to GitHub. So I'm quite keen to talk about this in a, well, just briefly draw your attention to it and then throw this open to discussion. We'll try and keep the discussion limited again and being mindful of the time constraints. So it's quite a big change. It kicks off with this statement: have you ever had the feeling that your head is not quite big enough to hold everything you need to remember? I'd really like to know what you think. It's intended to be a human attention-grabbing sentence that captures something of the value to an individual of using TiddlyWiki. If it has unpleasant connotations that I haven't thought through or something, then that would be great to know. And of course, I'm not really sure that whether it's appropriate, but it feels like you know, at least a reasonable answer to explore to some of the challenges that we've been facing. And it stops it being yet more passive text of TiddlyWiki is such and such. So next paragraph is more the type of thing that I've written before. Welcome to TiddlyWiki, a unique non-linear notebook for capturing, organizing, and sharing complex information. That phrase, capturing, organizing, and sharing, is a version of this kind of 3-step process that I think I identified, that was pointed out to me really right at the beginning of TiddlyWiki, that might be a good way of looking at what people did with it. And then it boosts your brain power as a bicycle boosts the power of your body. I suspect that isn't helpful, that phrase, but again, I'd welcome your feedback. It's possible that by talking about the human body for the second time, that it drags the emphasis rather too much to the human body and away from the software. So then third paragraph is a punctuated list, so it's not formatted as a list of things that you can do with TiddlyWiki. Use it to keep your to-do list, to plan an essay or novel, or to organize your wedding. Record every thought that crosses your brain, or build a flexible, responsive website for publishing a manifesto. And I think all those items we've seen before. And then this is...
Jeremy, I just want to say, regrettably, the word manifesto is highly charged.
Well, that's good feedback, yes. Well, as in, it's a communist thing.
No, no, no. As in, it's a terrorist manifesto.
Oh.
All counter organizations have manifestos, so it's always something in opposition.
Okay, I do see that makes sense. Well, this last one is an attempt to, last paragraph is an attempt to capture the, what's the word? The important consequences of the single file nature of TiddlyWiki, which isn't covered up till then. So it's an attempt to clearly point to the thing that makes TiddlyWiki be unique, and to try and do that again in terms that would make sense to somebody who's not interested in why it works or how it works, but wants to understand the benefit to them. And to me, that's about choice. I get to choose where to keep my data, and the guarantee, I guess, is it's down to me to make sure that I take the steps to ensure that my data is accessible in the decades to come. But I think it is reasonable for me to do so. I mean, I think there are reasonable ways that I can do that. I've already preserved plenty of digital files for more than 20 years, so I don't personally see a problem with preserving them for a lot longer than that. So those are the text bits. I'll very quickly just whiz through these guys. So this grew out of a more graphical thumbnail for the introduction to TiddlyWiki video. So you will all remember that at the moment, TiddlyWiki.com has this slightly hideous big red emergency imprecation to watch a video introduction, and it was pointed out by many people that it looks like an error message and is visually arresting in the wrong kind of way. So the first thing we did was a thumbnail, and the thumbnail looked like this. So this is, in fact, is a new thumbnail macro. All it does is sizes an image to fit, basically overlays a caption and an optional icon. And I was quite pleased with that. That looked like a very conventional call to action. Click here to watch a video. The thumbnail gives you some idea of what to expect when you get there. But that has mutated, and it's mutated to this, where we've got 8 thumbnails that you can probably see are all basically the same thing. They're an image, or in 2 cases a solid color with an overlay caption, and in some cases an icon. The latest news one is an icon, and we've still got the video icon. So big question for me is whether, having knocked these things together, whether this still looks sufficiently like a I'm a video link. Not certain about that. We've got a one change is to I've taken the existing hello there content and used it to start a beginner's guide. So my thinking was that one
Jeremy?
of the hello?
Yeah, Matthias here. Could I just interrupt with one question here, so that we can have this in the back of our heads as we hear your explanation? Who is the primary audience for this? I mean, what do they stumble in here because they've heard the words check out TiddlyWiki, or do they, have they seen a demo of it, or?
Well, I think that's what's so difficult is that the front page of TiddlyWiki has to work for everybody who arrives there. So I think that the realization that we need clear signposts to take specific audiences to the right place was part of our response to that concern. That you can't, I mean, I think in the past, when we have identified a single audience and played to just that audience, we've tended to exclude other audiences. So a point that I made before was that to a certain extent, the current copy, which is designed for people who know that they want a note-taking tool and are prepared to investigate a new one, but want to take it slowly, that in doing so, which means that on current TiddlyWiki.com, we don't expose any of the things that it turns out that the people in the community who love TiddlyWiki say are important about it. So it's not to say that I came to the conclusion that it's wrong to target casual users. I came to the conclusion that it's impossible, or that if TiddlyWiki.com only targets a single group of users, then it will fail all other groups of users. So, does that make sense?
Jeremy, there is one thing. So, just my experience when I go to a new service, so there are, let's say, 3 or 4 things that I want to see. The first thing is about. So what is this software about, this service or this tool or whatever. Then the second thing is price. I've searched for the pricing. So because most of the web services have a backend and have a freemium model or whatever. Then I'm looking at the terms of service, and then I'm looking at the team. So who are the developers, or is there ongoing development, so that I can have support. So, and yeah, I think that's the 3 or 4 things that I look first.
And I think those things, interestingly, they're conventional things, and they have conventional positions on a website. We may not have them in those positions on TiddlyWiki.com, but we could. You know, if I want to know about, I scroll to the bottom. We could have a light grey line at the bottom of TiddlyWiki.com with a footer that appeared below all other tiddlers that had, I think, a lot of the items that you mentioned. But I think that's not the problem that we're solving here. The problem, the best way I can phrase it, is this signposting thing. So I'm trying to have text that is at best informative, at worst intriguing for all audiences. So, you know, I'm saying we can't please everybody all of the time, but the text that you see above the fold before you scroll, it certainly needs to say, what can TiddlyWiki do for you? So the text, perhaps I should screen share back again. The text that we've got at the moment, the draft text, you know, it says that. May not say it in the clearest way and so on, but it's an attempt to address that really fundamental thing. It's also, it describes itself, so you know what to expect, and it discusses the need that it answers. So say it may not. Hello?
Yes, go finish your thought.
There may not be the yes, well, I'm not sure exactly what that part of the thought was. But the signpost, which is the other new thing, maybe part of what I'm thinking is that we can afford to take a more distinctive approach with the text if the signposts do their job of taking the audiences that we have to specifically cater for. So you know, one of the things that Mario didn't mention that he looks for is a video, and yet I notice that the vast majority of consumer-focused services these days choose to present themselves with a video. In some cases, it plays without me even.
Jeremy, yeah, if there is a video, let's say, in the top of the page, or normal cases, they are top right or something like this.
So do you think would you recognize this as a link to the video?
Yes, because it has the Google Play icon.
A little kind of distractingly tiny question, but is whether these things should abut. So I think, Matt, you were one of the people that gave some feedback about this. Oh no, wrong. Sorry.
A padding. Probably you want to have a padding.
I do, and I want to add it on here. Do I? No, thumbnail wrapper is what I want to add it on here again. So, that wasn't good. Oh, because I should have done it. I think I do actually need to do it as margin. Yeah, okay. So I experimented with various variations. If you bump it up just right, then you get that interesting optical illusion where you get a little grey circle in the intersection. But I think that it's pretty clear that if there is a border, it needs to be pretty small. But I do sometimes think that a border like that does add some welcome separation. You know, they bleeding together.
Jeremy, one issue there is clutter.
Sorry, Eric?
I'm saying that one issue there is you want to have enough separation to avoid having an interaction between the images that creates clutter.
Yeah.
You want to have each image, because they're very different from each other, but like for instance, I'm looking at the TiddlyWiki Classic one and the developer one next to it are both, screen snap kind of images, and it's, you don't want them to be seen as all part of flowing together into one big blob of stuff.
Well, one of the things there is that we need to reorder them to make them so that sensible ones are adjacent. And as I said, I don't think these are the right images. I wanted to use this because it's a natural image, and I think that makes a nice change, and it should probably go in between the screenshots in order to emphasize that.
Yeah.
But at the moment it says follow TiddlyWiki on Twitter, but subsequently we've got a follow button, so it needs to be used for something else. The poster says helping TiddlyWiki. It's possible that slightly misrepresents the poster, because what I really want people to do when they click through onto that is answer their question of where can I get this cool image, where can I see a bigger version of this cool image. Installing TiddlyFox is kind of, I wasn't sure, but it's possible that pointing to the really obvious calls to action is helpful, because otherwise TiddlyFox you don't encounter until you wade quite deeply through the process. Later we don't have.
I would have called it installing TiddlyWiki, and because I don't know what a TiddlyFox is. I heard about TiddlyWiki. What's a TiddlyFox? Why do I want to click that from the top?
Well, I started to explain something a minute ago, which was how I'd taken Dave's text from Hello There and moved it to be the beginning of a beginner's guide. So this is a development of the idea that the Getting Started Tiddler provides brief instructions, and that we signpost the beginner's guide for a more leisurely introduction. Leisurely is perhaps not the best word, because nobody's got leisure time, have they? But a slower paced introduction. And I think that I've always quite liked the way that here in Getting Started we enumerate the steps that you need to do to make TiddlyWiki do its stuff, and it's quite punchy, gets to the point. But clearly in dealing with the support requests I've had for TiddlyWiki, I have discovered that these instructions are ridiculously inadequate for some important number of users. So just so many of these steps, it's possible for people to misunderstand and get wrong. And that's my fault, not their fault. I'm not blaming them for getting it wrong. But it does, as I say, all of that has led to the idea that we talked about before, that we can signpost absolute beginners off somewhere else. And I had made the point that, at the moment that's a tiddler within this wiki, but it might be tiddlywiki.com/introduction or something. And I made the point that I think we kind of have to do that, because one of the things to make a good experience for beginners, you want to hide or only gradually disclose a lot of the detail. And tiddlywiki.com, being the complete reference for TiddlyWiki, is crammed with exactly the kind of detail that I think gets in the way of a clear step-by-step beginner's explanation. So,
Jeremy, I'm sorry. Just my quick reaction to the front page now is that it is light. It has a positive tone, although it talks about not being good enough to hold all your information and sort of the inadequacy of the human brain. But it has a positive tone. It's accessible. And the main thing is it's effortless. When I get to the front page of a site, I don't want to have to absorb a whole bunch of heavy concepts before I decide what to do next. I'd like to just figure out that there's things to click on to go and explore. And the previous page made you really work for it. This one, I can, if I want to, I can skim the verbiage above and say, oh yeah, it's lighthearted and positive. But then when I get down to those icons, the thumbnails, I say, aha. And I might not even be very discerning in what I choose to click on, but it's very inviting to click on them. And in effect, what that front page does now, it earns its click, whereas before it wasn't.
That's interesting. Good. Thank you, Eric. Any other thoughts from people?
One thing, I post a link for the German version. There is something which is, let's say, you're getting started is erste Schritte. If you click the link,
you reminded me of something very important. Yes.
If you click the link, can you click the link? It's in the chat box.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize.
I just saw that there is a problem with CSS or something, but on your browser it works. Okay, so this is like the beginning, getting started, and there I have included some videos. Yeah. As I said, if there is a video, I watch it because I prefer the video over the text.
Right.
So for me, as you wrote, as you said, the instructions are very precise, and they have to be precise, and therefore they are a little bit confusing, or maybe confusing. Yeah. So I watch the video first, and then I see, okay, it's easy. Yeah.
Cool. Well, you remind me actually of one other.
I have a thing. I can take it after what you're saying.
No, Matt, go for it.
Okay. Yeah. So what is striking is that everything is happening on the left side of the window. Not much on the right side. Yeah. Anything? Any?
Well, so I believe that I'd like to move to the point where we don't have the sidebar open by default. So I think the sidebar, we think of it as being the distinctive. Or I think of it as being part of the distinctive layout of TiddlyWiki, and it's solving, well, it's hardly solving the problem, but it is ensuring that we have a readable line length. So one of the can't claim much about the typography of TiddlyWiki, but I have tried to pay attention to what I've read about line length and to line spacing, in fact. So that's why, by default, and I think the corollary of that, when you do get rid of the sidebar, the reason why I wouldn't get rid of the sidebar at the moment is that on some people's screens, what you end up with is completely bonkers. There are people out there for whom it's going to look like that. And only in some cases does that make sense. He says scrolling and seeing some things look quite nice, actually, but not everything.
So then maybe that's not the view that should appear when you remove the sidebar. Maybe it should be like a central column instead, and not that wide.
Yes, I mean the centralized theme, which I'm sure you'll remember, is when you turn off the sidebar, it doesn't grow full width, stays like that. And yeah, that might be perhaps this with something that's like the sidebar, just a few pale links at the top for things like about and so on. The sort of things that Mario mentioned. So, but I mean, at the moment, that's a separate topic. I mean, I want to finish what I've got within the constraint of, these are just content changes, adopting the centralized theme wouldn't be a massive change. Perhaps that's something I should consider. Thank you, Matt.
Actually, there's just one point. So the 4 icons in one row are a little bit too much for me. So I'd like to have 2 rows with 3, because you have the mailing list, and Twitter and GitHub is at the footer again. So I think it's not necessary to have them 2 times.
Okay, so I think we've got to be careful here, because there may be two separate issues here. So one is what's the right number to have, and the other is the merits of the ones that I've got here. So this, of course, links to tiddlywiki.com/dev and isn't the same as the GitHub link, which does link straight to GitHub. So the rationale, which may be confused for that, is we want to lead people there because there's good stuff there. Or hopefully there'll be more good stuff the more people we lead there. And we put this here because we're trying to meet people's expectations of an open source project. You know, that says I'm an open source project, whereas this says something about navigating
documentation.
Navigating TiddlyWiki's internal world. So I don't know. I really don't know about that. I also,
I think there could be something like documentation, which can be two parts. So there's TiddlyWiki documentation and developers documentation, but it could be a different tiddler. So this should be only a bigger icon documentation.
Well, I mean, I think the TiddlyWiki documentation for users is here, for as long as we've got the sidebar open. And so there might be a question about the default tab that we present. And you know, for the moment, this is the way that you would find the About Tiddler that Mario wants.
Yeah, I also wouldn't have a problem if we have three rows with 3 icons, but I want to have a margin and I want to have them bigger.
You want to have them bigger?
Yeah. For me. So if you have a margin and if they are bigger.
Well, let's try and do that because that makes life fun, shall we? So to make them bigger, at the moment they're 140 by 79, and I need to preserve the same aspect ratio. So 140 times 1.5, 210, 79 times 118, so 210, 118, and we were going to go with a margin which would go with not quite the smallest one. Okay. Sorry, I assume I'm screen sharing and you weren't all watching me putting faces while I was typing for that. Okay, so they're big, perhaps too big. And I've added the margin.
Do you have zoom level 0?
We do now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think let's try. What was it before? 79 by 140, and I multiply by 1.5. So I don't know what 140 times 1.2, 168. So somebody remember 168 and 95. Better. So yeah, that I agree. Yeah. That does look better. And it's trivial to get this down to 6 of them. A slight concern I have is that we have consumed a lot of vertical space. I mean, I've got, I think, a big screen, but it's only big for a laptop, I guess. But we're halfway down the screen before we start. These.
Yeah. Can you have Control Shift M? No, this is not Firefox. Okay.
But it can be Firefox. Let me switch to Firefox.
So if you say Control Shift M.
Oh, but it's probably Command Shift M for me.
Yeah, probably.
Oh no, Control Shift M. No.
So with the DevTools, you can have different views.
No, it was opt. Yes, Chrome has this as well. And in fact, Chrome's maybe is certainly more. Well, it's been slightly annoying me. You press that button, and then it does this kind of scaling lark. And I found that I've had to fiddle around with options, and I've still found it confusing, and I don't know, but yes, and it emulates touch events as well. You can see I'm scrolling by dragging the background there. But anyway, yes, here we are in. Yes, I mean I do this all the time. Ooh, that's slightly annoying. It doesn't. Where's yes, that's better, isn't it? Sorry, Mario, you can say something.
Yeah, but this is just for testing, so you can see how it looks like. With, I don't know. I think 1200 is minimum monitor, or 1400 could be a minimum.
Yeah,
monitor.
And that's what mine. On device, mine is 1440 by. Yeah, you could see it briefly flash up there. I think 1440 by something. But in fact, here I was raising this. I mean, parallel to Matt's concern about use of the horizontal use of the screen, I was raising concerns about vertical use. Just for before being acutely conscious that we must move on, I wonder about adopting the centralized theme. What do you think? I mean, I might put up a pre-release with it. In order for people to try and make a post to the group, in order for people to sort of try it out. Okay. Anybody else got any further thoughts on any of that stuff? That's very helpful. We're going to get bigger icons. We're going to have a margin. There's only going to be 6 of them, and we're going to rationalize what we link to. But any other thoughts? Very welcome. Okay. So now, the next thing I was going to bring up was to just quickly talk about the TinCan API. So this is the stuff with, hang on, we've got a new visitor on the group as well. Right, it's added 2 more people. Was to talk with Ed about the TinCan API. So we've covered this a few times in the Hangouts before. The TinCan API is a standard and growing API for applications, for learning applications, to record student progress. They're a very general activity stream that allows a client can post that a person performed a particular task, and then it records that, makes available reporting and so on, so you can report on student progress. Our cunning strategy is that by integrating TiddlyWiki with TinCan API, we'll make it much easier for organizations that are already using TinCan-enabled products to work with TiddlyWiki learning materials alongside their existing stuff, e.g. their existing Moodle system. So as part of quite a few strands that are going on to try to realize some of TiddlyWiki's potential in education. Frustratingly, the current status of the project is that after a very enthusiastic start from everybody, which has been really great and particularly informative for me, things rather ran aground when I became ill a few weeks ago, and since I came back from being poorly, I have been perpetually under this enormous stone of getting version 5.1.8 out, which is frustrating that I can't take on another big task until that's done, because 5.1.7 was out in December now, so we're now well into the zone of embarrassingly delayed release. I'll get a few weeks grace for having been ill, but really need to get the thing out the door. So that's the current situation. For me, the frustration remains that I think with a very small amount of work, we can do enough TinCan integration with TiddlyWiki to be very informative for future experimentation and goal setting. So I think we can get something running that is we can point to and prod and talk about, that'll then drive, hopefully, an exciting onward roadmap, or things that'll take us closer to the end goal, which I think for many of us is being able to support a distributed learning environment where, worse even than mesh networking, there's intermittent network connectivity via people moving hard drives or USB sticks around the place, and yet being able to coherently track student progress. So Ed, anything from you? Because of course it wasn't just me that was in hospital, it was you too.
Yeah, regretfully, I'm pretty much in the same boat, Jeremy. Just coming out of that, and also Khan Academy Lite, we're finishing up a pre-release of the beta for the 13 version, and I've been heavily involved in testing that lately. So you know what I mean. My time has been about the same as yours. It sounds like.
Yes. Well, it's I'm sure you'll be just as frustrated as I am.
Exactly. But I did have a discussion with Daniello about a week ago, and we were talking about his encrypting individual tiddlers, the plugin that he has for that, which I still think could be of use, like for a teacher to be able to put in a quiz, say, and then some JavaScript, and then an answer key, and then have the answer key be able to provide the feedback directly to the student. So he said that he was also working on a mechanism to try to make that available to where multiple tiddlers could be decrypted rather than just one at a time, which would provide that functionality perhaps. And so I've recently forked that, and I'm trying to work with him on that. So yeah,
right. Very interesting. I mean, I must say, I think I said in a thread recently that the reason why I did whole file encryption rather than individual tiddler encryption to start with is because the user interface is much easier. It's much easier to make a user interface that makes it clear whether the file is encrypted, whereas the class of mistakes where a tiddler you thought was encrypted isn't, is much harder to keep track of. So I wanted to do the kind of the safe thing, but it absolutely wasn't, because I'm not interested in encrypting individual tiddlers. But what's so interesting about this case is that the user interface required isn't just a generic, here's a padlock, here's how you unlock it on an individual tiddler. It's kind of built into the functionality of an app that is being built out of TiddlyWiki. And so it's conceivable that kind of separates the mainstream user interface concerns, for how would we present to users the ability to encrypt a whole set of tiddlers together, which is quite a tough thing to do for an end user interface, but being able to do it within the context of a teacher who's authoring a quiz and wants to lock up the answers, that's a much simpler, much more straightforward scenario. So yeah, I welcome that. And in fact, it's interesting. It's another example of JavaScript library integration, because all this crypto stuff is possible because TiddlyWiki integrates a standard off-the-shelf JavaScript crypto library, which takes advantage of many years of smart people's hard work to do all the difficult and standard things in crypto. Right, we've got less than half an hour left, so I'm going to keep moving things, because I know that there's still a few topics that I know several people are interested in. So I wanted to now talk about sidebar search. Oh, actually, before we do, we've got two new visitors to welcome. Alec, hello, have you got a microphone? We've got Alec at work without a microphone. Well, good to welcome you here. Alec's been active on the group for the last few weeks. Came on board with some really interesting material about search engine optimization, which wasn't the side of search engine optimization that we've discussed before, which is how TiddlyWiki exposes its text, or how it appears when it's crawled by a search engine, but which was also about the keywords that people use to find TiddlyWiki, which is stuff that I see in Google Analytics but hadn't really given a great deal of thought to. So great to have you here, Alec. Welcome. I hope you'll be able to join us with a microphone when we have this at a more sensible time. And Alexie, are you able to introduce yourself? Yes, Alexie, hi. If you've got a microphone and are able to introduce yourself, that'd be great. Otherwise, if you would like to say something about yourself, introduce yourself, say something about yourself in the text tab, I will read it out to the viewers. Okay, so Alexie doesn't have a mic. Yes, sidebar search. That was the topic I was suggesting that we talk about. So this has been raging on GitHub recently, and it's quite an interesting story that, again, it illustrates what's so wonderful and what's so fascinating and frustrating about open source software. Let me screen share. Oops. Ton Herner, who hasn't been on the Hangouts for quite a few weeks or months actually, but pointed out last year that the way that we do search in the core is pretty clunky. He said it more eloquently. So to be clear, the problem that he's talking about is the way that as soon as I start typing a search phrase, the sidebar tabs disappear. In order for me to regain access to them, I have to discover that I can click that X, at which point I lose my search term. So Ton is articulating in the ticket that I flashed up very briefly, he's articulating a concern that had been discussed many times before and since, really, which is that this architecture is non-standard, confusing, and so on. So that happened in November. There was then quite a bit of discussion immediately, including a very obvious idea, really, which is to get rid of the separate search text box and instead have a search tab, and within that tab to have both the search results and the search field. And I quite like this approach, very nice and simple. The downside, obviously, is that it loses single-click access to search. So if I'm on some other tab and I want to start searching, I need to click on the search tab and then probably click on the field in order to give it the focus so that I can start typing. Whereas our present arrangement has the advantage that at all times I can see the text box, can always click on it to start typing in it. So there is much discussion. This is one of those cases where I think GitHub shows itself to be not great. It's very hard to get an overview. But here's another mock-up from Matt. I think I said at the beginning when we were doing the introductions how powerful I find mock-ups as a tool, and this very clearly articulates an idea of keeping the text box and search box in the same place as before, but just moving the search results into a tab. And then there's some discussion of the fact that, oh, here's a refinement actually, where Matt's integrated the other types of search and also a close box. And so the discussion carried on, in fact, until I went on holiday at the beginning of the year. It looks like, I think it was, yes, it was still roughly under discussion then. And then it came back to my attention about a month ago when Florent raised the fact that it was still really frustrating to him that this wasn't fixed. And then just a few days ago, Florent was making the point that this issue still hasn't been fixed, but instead there's a whole bunch of other new features in quotes, the help panel, that he doesn't understand, isn't keen on, and he's frustrated at the priority, the fact that this search problem still hasn't been fixed. The part of my response is to clarify exactly what he did mean. And what the concern that I had, that I'm expressing here, is that although some suggestions have been made for an improvement to what we've got, I wasn't convinced that the suggestions were better than what we've got and didn't carry other disadvantages. So gloriously, a few days ago, Florent created a prototype, and I can't overemphasize how brilliant I think this is. I mean, this is, there's a lot of emphasis in software development communities on having running code, and being able to play with running code like this is amazing. So as soon as I start typing, I get a new tab labeled search results. It has itself 2 sub-tabs, because if we go into plugins, Daniela's context search plugin is also installed, which adds this additional tab for the search results. And if I clear the search term, then the search tab reappears. So the concern that I have is that the spontaneous appearance of a new tab is not typical behavior for tabs. Now I've got to put a little asterisk there. In my world, in my view, there are 2 types of tabs. There are document tabs, which is what you see in a browser, for instance, where each tab represents a document, a separate document that the user is manipulating. And then there are tabs which are about splitting a complex form up into pages that you can step through by flicking between the tabs. And my concern is that I've never seen tabs that are used for navigation like this spawning another type of tab spontaneously. We can somewhat ameliorate it by labeling the search results tab, by keeping it visible all the time. But then you get this slightly weird thing where you've got a blank tab visible. You know, if I clicked that X to clear the search term and we kept this tab open, it would be empty, and that doesn't seem very. That also seems a little bit confusing. The other concern I have is that there's no visual relationship. There's a lot going on here. So we've got a strong visual relationship between these things because they're all tabs. We've got a strong visual relationship between these things because they're aligned. They're on a line together. But the result between the search results and the text box, the link between the search results and the text box, can only be perceived by the cause and effect that when I start typing, the new tab appears. So the discussion is ongoing. I really wanted to just summarize where I thought we were in the discussion, perhaps to emphasize again that I really want to change this, but I want to change it to something that fixes all the problems that all of us have identified. So in order to put up with the inevitable side effects of fixing this, so making a large-scale change to the way that the sidebar works is liable to have backwards compatibility impact. It's quite a big piece of work, it's quite a serious piece of work, but I think it's worth doing because I think what we've got is a bit broken. But as I say, I'm going to set a very high bar that what we replace it with must be better. And I won't try and summarize the discussion on the thread, but one of the discussion points was that it was pointed out to me in some cases the criticisms that I was making of the new demo could also be made of the existing behavior. And I think that's true, but that really speaks to my point that I want to get something that's better. So, there are plenty of things wrong with the current behavior, and let's fix them rather than come up with a different solution that still has those problems. Any thoughts? I mean, Matt, you were one of the main participants in the thread, I think.
Yeah, I think as I also posted there, this is area of plugins, because I want to have the core to have a functional search behavior, but it should be a small functionality, because there is enough space for plugins. So we have the constant.
No, that's okay. But do you mean that you're happy for the core to continue to behave as it does right now?
No. I didn't like the removal of the tabs since search was invented or introduced. So because I'm searching for let's say the same terms several times. So and then I have to click the clear tab, then move to some tiddlers, and then I have to retype my search term again. Yeah. So that's why I really would like to have something that is stored. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think the existing demo is a little bit of overkill for the core, because there is no space anymore for different plugins. So I think there should be a mechanism that lets plugin authors hook into the search typing. So if you type something, then there should be some hooks where a plugin author can be log in and do different things. So we can, for example, we have a chain of search. So we can have the new tabs, we can have Danielo's plugin, and then maybe there are different plugins that can work in order for something. Yeah?
Okay, I mean, I don't know though, because I think there's two things here. There's the user interface for search. We've already got mechanisms to extend that, which is well, best manifested by the way that Danielo's plugin, by carrying a certain tag, can tap itself in so that it appears as a tab in the search results. But in terms of any other hooks for search, what I thought you were going to say is hooks for plugins to be able to process search terms, so that if I search for plus n, it creates a new tiddler with the title n. Those kind of special behavior for certain key phrases, trying to understand natural language, those kinds of things. I'm not so sure that there's anything that we're not already doing that would permit a plugin to kind of tap into the search mechanism, really.
Jeremy, one thing that does come to mind there is shipping a search request up to the server side for some handling.
Yes. We definitely need to do that. Yes.
Yeah, and there may be different external services that might want to be searched. For example, there might be some web service endpoint that.
No, that's an excellent example of exactly. It's a case where what we need, I think, is for a message to be sent when a search is initiated, so that the Tiddly web adapter can grab that message and do something. Probably the right thing to do is to pull back the skinny tiddlers for all the search term things, and then when those skinny tiddlers come in, then they will appear in the search results, as soon as they pop in. So yes, definitely need that, and that does one of many things that suggests we generally need more hooking mechanisms, more ways for, there's a lot of emphasis in TiddlyWiki on ways for plugins to insert their own segments of user interface interleaved with existing bits, but in some cases we need hooks so the actual behavior of TiddlyWiki can be changed.
Yeah, what I wanted to make sure is that there is a mechanism, for example, that that Danielo knows how to hook into the UI in this case, so that there should be always the same mechanism that says, okay, if there is something I want to search, I need to do, I don't know, I need to tag my tiddler like this, and then it's hooked into the UI and it shows up in the search tab. So this mechanism has to be unified. So there is something like an API for the UI. So because for me, I want to have a search bar or a search tab that I can pin. So for example, I have 3 or 4 search terms that I have to type all the time. Yeah, and so I just want to keep it, so that I don't have to type it. But this is clearly part of a plugin.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure that I'm fully understanding you. I mean, the current search mechanism is incredibly extensible. It would be trivial to create a new segment, say a new page control button that preset the search term to a given string, or to have a list of 3 tiddlers with saved search strings, and to provide buttons that saved the current search string in one of those presets and buttons that retrieved them. All of those things could be added and interleaved with the existing bits of UI. So I'm not sure, but I think I was hearing you suggesting that a new mechanism was required for this hooking integrating to happen, and that's what I'm not clear about.
No, if the mechanism is already there, I think the mechanism is already there, because there is the automatic mechanism for Tiddly maps, where you have this behavior for the maps.
Right, I think you may just be describing the extensible search panes. So, I mean, we've already got this extensibility that if you've got more than one search visualizer, as they're called, registered, then tabs appear in the search results to let you select between the different visualizers, and each visualizer is independently able to decide how to, well, actually not only how to display the search results, but in fact they get to choose how to do the search as well, so they can change the search processing arbitrarily. So I mean, it doesn't do everything that you ask for in terms of, for instance, being able to save a set of preset search terms. Okay, we're going to be closing in 5 minutes, so I think sadly that means that we haven't had time to discuss everything. Topics for the record that I wanted to discuss was 2, in fact, from Daniele. One was the question he raised about, is TiddlyWiki a framework, which I think is a really interesting question, and maybe no, I'll resist being pulled into it. Another question from Daniele, well, it wasn't really expressed as a question, but it was a concern, really, which is, are we, in developing the TiddlyWiki core, paying sufficient attention to the smartphone mobile story? To which I think the answer is, I tend to run TiddlyWiki on a tablet more than I do on a phone, so there is a chance that I don't pay sufficient attention to the phone experience. And Daniele, I think primarily, or at least very heavily, uses TiddlyWiki on a phone, and so it's a very interesting perspective to have. I also wanted to discuss the 5.1.8 release. Haven't really had a, well, we've touched on the big current holdup, which is completing that work I've done on the front page. And other than that, we were also going to have an update from Eric on his book. And Eric, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to do that. You may well want to take advantage, once I've gone in a couple of minutes, you may well want to take advantage of the other people being there to discuss it. Or, well, actually, look, I'm going to literally go in 5 minutes. So let me spend 20 seconds. It's not going to be quite long enough to do what I'd hoped to do with Eric. But let's set the scene for what we're going to talk about next week, assuming Eric is able to join us. And it's something I think is really fascinating. Eric goes off to go and write the ultimate guide to TiddlyWiki. So, of course, that means writing lots of text about TiddlyWiki. Only it doesn't, because what Eric has actually spent X% of his time on, and I'm not sure what percentage it is, but a fairly substantial percentage, is creating a generic reusable framework whereby anybody can author and publish a book with TiddlyWiki. It's not complete, and as with all the work that any of us do, when Eric shows it and talks about it, he will also talk about all the things that he wants it to do, but it doesn't do.
I want to just take 30 seconds to say the problem I faced in writing the book was twofold. First is the actual writing process and having tools to help me write the book. And then the second was how to present my writing in an interactive way. And what I found was that the same tool, TiddlyWiki, the wiki way of writing, which is that sort of ad hoc, just throw things in and then they stick and then they grow and then you refactor them. That way of writing is very, very productive for the kind of material I'm creating, and that what I found I did was I started out creating material and reached a point where the material became unwieldy, and so I turned to optimizing my tool set, which of course is TiddlyWiki, and in the process I created something which, as Jeremy has observed, can now be sort of more of a generic tool for to strip out my content, and it's still a nice little book reading writing environment.
And so Eric, I promise will take advantage of you to have you show it to us next week.
Next
gives
time.
you a bit more chance.
I will do a little after the
Yes.
recording stops. Anyone who wants to, I'll show them.
That's great. Otherwise, then closing up. Any other comments or thoughts from anybody? Feel free to speak up. In which case, it falls to me to say thank you. Alec is saying thank you in the chat window. Say thank you to you. Very much appreciate you giving up your time, participating in the talk. I hope I give you all enough of a chance to talk and aren't doing too much talking myself. Certainly, it's when other people talk that I tend to learn more. So much appreciate that. I'm incredibly lucky to be the recipient of your attention. So I salute you and thank you very much for that. I will book the next Hangout in the next few days. As you may imagine, it is probably in a large part of the world. It's bank holiday chaos this weekend, and so all bets are off as to when the next Hangout will be, but I will book it hopefully within the next 10 days or so. Brilliant. So everybody, thank you very much. I'll press the stop broadcast button. Those people will be able to carry on. Bye-bye. Cheers.